All right, so let's talk about using the pen tool in Photoshop and how you can trace drawings without having to need a tablet or any other way to physically draw on your computer. I'm just going to be using my mouse for this tutorial just so you know that there is definitely a way you can do it without having to deal with not having a tablet. So this is a sketch that I've made on pencil with a ballpoint pen on just regular sketch paper, so hopefully that's stuff you have access to. Like I've said, just using a pencil or anything should be fine. Ideally, you would have something that's a little bit cleaner than this, but it's what I could find. So I have brought this into Photoshop and now I'm ready to work with it. First, though, I want to point something out. When I imported this, I had desaturated it completely on my phone, and in doing so, I have accidentally changed how how Photoshop processes the colors. So if we go up to Image and to Mode, you can see that it's clicked as grayscale. Now what this means is that I can't use any colors at all when I'm now processing it, but that's not what I want. So to fix that, all we have to do is just go up to this image mode and then choose RGB color. And we're not going to flatten it because I want to preserve the background layer. And boom, now we can work in color again. So what I'm going to do just to start off with is I'm just going to make a new layer, X to swap my colors, Control backspace to fill, and then I'm going to change this to screen. Now what this is going to do is just sort of give me something that I can tell apart from black super easily. So I'm just going to rename this as color tone and this as base sketch, and then just put them in a folder that I'm going to call pen sketch, just so that it's not in my way and I can just drop the opacity on this, and now we can start tracing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the pen tool. So the pen tool is a very versatile tool. How it works is it works with vectors, which primarily you use vectors in Illustrator. And just to kind of demonstrate what the difference between vectors and your normal pixel drawings are, is I'm just going to go over sort of what I did in class. So as a refresher, Photoshop renders everything as a image. So that means it renders each individual pixel. And as you zoom in, you can see that it is taking each one of these pixels and kind of dividing them in a grid so you can see them more clearly. Now that's a very nice way to work with stuff like this, where it's like a picture that we've taken with a phone. It's something that works well for most digital drawings. However, something like this is made in Illustrator, and this is just a line drawing that I've done. And all of these circles are calculated with these curves. They're called Bezier curves. We can get into how that sort of works. There's a lot of very complicated math behind it, but it's not something that you need to know to actually use them. Most of your understanding through how these work is going to just come from experience and messing with them yourself. So if you want to download Illustrator and mess around with that, I would highly recommend it. It's a fun program to learn. But it does not register pixels, so it does everything via math. So this is the exact same principle as if like you were to put a graph into a graphing calculator and then zoom in really close on that line. It's going to remain along that same slope and everything all the way through. So it automatically snaps to the center, which is why I did that. That's the main difference. So we're going to use these math-based curves to do line art in Photoshop. So I'm going to tab back to Photoshop and just make a new layer. Mostly for my own sanity, I don't think that's necessary. But, so the way this works is you can make a point, and when you drag that point, you get these little handles. And then you can make another, and another, and another, all the way around, and you see this little circle here that's going to let you close off your path. Now, up here in the panels, you can see that I have mask and shape as options. Now, what a mask is going to do It's the same thing that I've talked about in our Intro to Photoshop course. But if we do a mask, you see it will make this mask over here a vector mask on our layer. That's not what we want. That is out of the scope of what we're doing right now. So instead, I'm going to undo that and click Shape. Now, Shape is going to make it appear on our Layers panel instead of our Paths panel. And that's going to give us something to actually edit. So, now that we have this blob, I'm going to go over here to the Path Selection tool, and then up here at Stroke, I'm just going to click a black stroke. Just like right there. And then I'm going to increase the width of that stroke up to, say, 5 pixels. Now you can see that that is a lot more visible and you can start moving it around. Now I'm going to just hide our very sad looking man there and just kind of demonstrate how these paths work. So if we go back to our path selection tool, you can start to see, actually you need to click your direct selection tool. So this is going to let you edit each of these individual points. And as you drag these handles, it changes the curvature of the line. So if we select these two, you can see that this right here and this right here both affect this line. Now, how this works is, here, I'm just going to take a quick snip of this so I can draw on top of it and kind of demonstrate. So this is just a snipping tool. You can find it if you search in you press Windows key and you're using a Windows computer. But we're just going to hide this real fast, paste that picture in. So, how this works is this one right here affects this, that, there. So that cross right there, from this handle to this point and this handle to this point, averaging all of that out using some very complicated math is going to give us this curve. So that just means that changing the location of these handles is going to change how that curve looks. This is something I encourage you to ask me about next class if you have questions about it. It is a little bit out of the scope of what I was planning on going over for this curriculum, but if you're using a mouse, it's kind of important to know. So, as you can see, here we've got that same situation where now if they're going in separate directions, instead of on the same side of the line, they're on different sides. You can start to get this like S-curve. And I believe these are called Bezier curves if you want to look them up and kind of get an understanding of math. I know that a lot of people find that stuff very interesting. So these handles are just going to let you play with your shape and kind of figure it out. If you want to edit that, you can go to the pen tool. You can convert pen tool and make it a sharp line that is no longer affected by the curve there. It doesn't have the handles. Or if you have a sharp line like this, you can turn it back into a curve by clicking and dragging out. Now that we kind of have some sort of understanding of how this path works, I'm going to kind of go through how I would go about actually going over drawing in Photoshop and make it a digital drawing. So, we're going to bring our very sad looking spacer man back and just delete these two layers because we don't need them anymore. And then going back to the pen tool, you can get there by pressing P. We're just going to start by tracing his face. So, we can start up here, kind of down on the jawline. And remember, your trace doesn't have to be perfect because you can always go back and edit where these handles are going to end up. So I like to drag things out to kind of give them more curvature because I have some experience with this stuff and I like having the option to mess with the handles, and it's a lot easier for me to just kind of get rid of those handles and tweak them as I go along. But once I'm happy with how that looks, I'm just going to go up to Shape, make it into a shape, go back to our Path Selection tool, select black as our stroke color, and then increase our stroke width to, say, 3 pixels. now we have something going on here. I don't think 3 pixels is quite enough, so we're going to say 5. Now, something you can do here too is there's more options on how to do a stroke. So if we go to this right here, it's going to bring up stroke profiles, and we can go more options, customs. I believe there is a way to use brushes to do strokes on your paths. If we brushes, that is something I'm going to have to find later, I think. If that's something that interests people, I can definitely do that. So going back to our character here, I'm just going to start tweaking the line art here to kind of line up a little better with what I wanted. So like I think his chin line here might be a little sharp, so I'm going to pull that out, kind of mess with it. This right here seems very sharp, so the wider you make your handles, the less sharp your angle is going to be. Alright, and then we can go back with the pen tool and do his, let's start right here on the line there, kind of block out his neck. Same situation, convert it into a shape. And you can see that it's kind of working with the same stuff over here, and it's maintaining all of my, oh, interesting. So if you will notice, because I didn't tab off of my pen tool, it went ahead and closed that shape for me with a straight line. Now, I don't want that to happen, so I'm just going to Control Z. If you're working with this sort of workflow here, you'll want to select a different tool, kind of maybe tab off of your shape, and then go back with your pen tool and try again. Oh, it still did it. I'm going to create a new layer and then try that. There, that fixed it. Once again, we convert it into a shape. Go back to here. And it is all messed up again. So, Illustrator is a lot more refined for this sort of line work. However, Photoshop is going to allow you to use everything else we've talked about in this class and allow you to kind of keep up a little bit better. So, I believe it was actually 5. This is not the method that I usually use, but if you have something that you like, you can definitely start to trace it using this method. So let's go in and maybe work on one of his eyes. And instead of closing it off, actually no, I will close it off. We're just going to add a little bit right there and then close it. So I accidentally just tabbed off without converting it to a shape layer. So how I find that path again is up here in the layers panel. You have 3 different tabs. You have layers, channels, and paths. We're just going to select this work path right now. I believe that is it. Okay, direct select, work path. There we go. And we are going to make it into a shape. Go back here, you can see it is all registered now. We're going to zoom in and just kind of tweak it a little bit so it lines up better. Alright, so what I could do at this point is just go through this entire drawing and try to get all of my lines figured out. So that's just a very quick introduction to how to use the pen tool in Photoshop. If you still want to use Photoshop but you don't have access to a drawing tablet, this is a great way to start. Okay, so let's say that we're not quite happy with how that basic stroke looks, and we want to start using our brushes in these vector graphics. So what we have here is just everything I was working with before. I've hidden all of my shape layers, and I've made a new layer that's just a, we're just going to call this stroke path. So works a little bit differently. You can't really go back and edit shape layers that you've already made. You have to do this when you make your path. So we're just going to name our layer. And with the pen tool selected, well, actually first, let's go to the brush tool. What we have right here is a square brush that has a pin pressure based opacity and size. So that just means the lighter your pressure is, the lighter your brush is going to be. I can't demonstrate that right now because I'm just using my mouse, but do trust me. So we're going to just, go a little bit bigger than 7. Using the square brackets to increase brush size here, we're going to go up to, say, a 15. That's going to be pretty thick. So now, using our pen tool, we're just going to go over and trace his jawline once again. Doesn't have to be perfect. This is just a demonstration, so same thing we just did, but without converting it to a shape. So once we are happy with that line, we are going to right-click on it and hit Stroke Path. And now this is going to take all of the brush settings we just defined and the color that we currently have on our palette right here and stroke the path. So now if we deselect, you can see that that path has been given this stroke. If I move this around, you can see that this stroke is completely separate from the path I just made. So that's a good way to make everything in the same sort of graphics that you would using a pen, like a tablet pen, only using the pen tool in Photoshop. So once you deselect and you're no longer in like vector editing tools, which are all of these, from the pen tool down to the square tool, that will stay. So you can keep on doing that until your entire drawing has been inked using a little bit more organic looking path.